Zayin Amad Aleph, continuing. Shalchu lei Lamar Okva. They sent to Mar Okva. Zamra Manaland Asir. Music. How do we know that it's ossur? So the Gemara is taking on that it is ossur. We're just looking for the proof. Everybody knows. Everyone's living that music is ossur. They just don't have the source. Now again, Shartat is our sugya here, so therefore he had a posuk and he did the sirtut before he wrote, Al tismach Yisrael el gil ka'amim. Don't be happy, Jews, to the happiness until you reach the level of the joy of the nations. So this here is our proof that music is ossur, because the Jews can't be happy to the level of the nations. The nations are obviously happy with their music. Now Rashi understands the question here. Zamra the shorur beis ha mishtaot, to sing in the houses of feasts. So basically, in a feasting house, how do we know that it's that it's ossur? And really, at this point, we don't know where Rashi is getting this from. How do we know that? Because he's in the question stage. Zamra manalan de ossur. So how does he know that's going to be the question? The Gemara asks, they should have asked it from this pasuk. Bashir lo yishta yayin, yemar skar le shisov. So in singing, don't drink wine, and the bitter of the beer of those who drink it. So if it's from that pasuk, adhavamina hanimin lezemer demana. If I just had it from that pasuk, it would just be kalim. When you're making music from kalim, that it would be ossur. Aval de puma shari. But from that pasuk, from Bashir lo yishtu yayin, then I would think that puma is shari. Kamash malan, that puma is ossur. So Pash Pshat in the Gemara so far is that we have two psukim. One pasuk, the shir lo yishtu yayin is ossuring musical instruments for music. And then we have a second pasuk, Al tismach Yisrael al gil ka'amim, that is ossuring bepel, if you're singing without musical accompaniment. That's the Pasha Pshat of the Gemara, that everything is ossur. Bein bekli, bein ba peh. Again, peh would just be like if you're, on your way to work and you start singing a song. It's not a cappella is a specific type of thing where people are making like music from that, just singing, right? Most people sing without instruments. And then music again, music you make, you wouldn't use music before tape recorders, that type of stuff. Then your music instruments would be how you make music. So you're singing or you're making music, everything's ossur. That's the Pasha Pshat of the Gemara so far. So seemingly from Rashi at this stage, Rashi seems to only say if you're at a feast house, if you're going to a bar or you're having some type of feast, only there it's ossur. We don't know where he's getting it from. Is it Yemei Skar? It'll be bitter. So demana is a keener. You have a harp. I don't know like this specifically. So we have many kli negia, whether it's a guitar or a flute or a korg. We have a korg. So you get all the instruments in there. Now Tosfos Zamra Manalan de ossur. Perish b'kontras l'shaor b'beis ha-mishtos. This is at least how Tosfos is learning Rashi. And seemingly v'kein mashma midakamar v'lishlech le mehaka. So we should have sent him this pasuk. What he sent that pasuk? Send this pasuk. B'shir lo yichalayin b'perach basra desaita tana mishabatel sanhedrin batel shir b'beis ha-mishtos. So seemingly there that the second pasuk is going on the bottle in the feast houses. So there's something going on in the feast houses that will be a certain level where you're ossuring, where outside of the feast house would be okay. So Tosfos seems to be saying that Rashi understands from the next pasuk, from the question that's going to come, that it's going to be on the feast houses. Now, but that doesn't really make so much sense here in the Rashi, because Rashi's going to the beginning of the sukkah, Zimra, Manalan da ossur. How does he know from this later on in the Gemara that what the question is here? And so again, the way the Tosfos is at least learning Rashi outside of the feast houses, it's then the music is mutter. V'roi lahachmir b'kayotze. So it's fitting to be machmir things that are like this. Dahahu in the Yerushalmi, dahahu kam v'damech bezimmer. So we saw this on Vavam Beis. That Tosfos brought from the Yerushalmi that certain people would go to bed and they would wake up with music, and that is ossur. So mit'aneg beyoter. So they're getting a great level of tanog from it. So tanog, yoter tanog, Tosfos seems to be saying is ossur. So similarly here, he's linking it also to this in the feast houses. So when you're feasting, when you're drinking, and then you are singing along with this, and that brings a great level of tanog. The shir shel mitzvah here. So he says roy to be machmir. So anybody who is so you can't get up and so having music to wake you up in the morning, like your alarm, and you go to sleep listening to the radio. Similarly, Tosfos here is saying that is ossur and it's roy to be machmir. You shouldn't do this because it's too much of an oineg. The shir shel mitzvah shari. Now here's kind of the first heter is the shir of mitzvah. Kagom b'shas chuppah she'oisen l'semach chatan v'kala. So you have a music where you are misameach the chatan and the kala. So that's basically the Tosfos, which we will get back to. Now here in this is in Soita, which he brings Misha Balta Sanhedrin Batal Hashir Mibeis Hamishtos. So when the Sanhedrin was bottle, so then the shir was bottle from the house of Mishtos. So again, this is the Mishnah that's saying that now no longer the feast house, when you're having a feast, you're having a good time, you're having a party, can you have a song? Shenemar, so the pasuk is Bashir lo yishto yain. So here clearly this pasuk is from the Mishnah. Now, so going back, so how do we, if we're coming off this Mishnah, so Zimmer Manalan to ossur, well, we already know, don't we? Because the Mishnah gave me the pasuk. The Mishnah has this pasuk here, b'shel lo yishta yain. So why are we asking here? How do we know that it's ossur? And then he's writing a different pasuk completely, and he's like, well, why didn't you bring the pasuk that was in Soita? Well, if it was the one from Soita, so then what are we doing here, asking the question in the first place? So everything's a bit strange here. So the Gemara in Soita here, Mamai Shibet Lata Sanhedri, that the Ketiv is talking about. So Rav Huna Berei to Rav Yehoshua Amar Kra as a Kanim Mishar Shivtu. So the elders in the gate end, and the Bechoirim stop their singing. So the Kanim Mishar is the Sanhedrin, and then the young ones stop their singing. So you see that there's a connection between the bittul of the Sanhedrin and the stopping and of the thing. So it's the bittul of the Sanhedrin that stops the music. Now this Mishnah seems to be clearly, it's just saying bottle has shirmi based on mishtos. So therefore they like to go on like Rashi, that the only isser is in a house of feasting, and therefore when you're outside a house of feasting, music is fine. Amar Rav Huna berei de Rav. Amar Rav. So Rav says, Udna, which is an ear, an oizen, deshame zimra to aker. Any ear that hears music should be uprooted. So Rav seems to be going a bit berserk here, because we've said that just don't go feasting, don't go drinking in the nightclubs where they're playing all the music. Otherwise, the music is fine. And Rav says any ear that hears music should be destroyed. I mean, this is like, you kind of jumping the gun here, Rav. No one's really talking about that. Amar Rava, Zamar Bebesa, Chorva, Beseifa, that the any music that's in a house, then the petach will be destroyed. And it goes through some proofs there. Amar Rav Huna, the music of a nagri u de bakri ishari. So this is like hard work where you're like pulling ships, or you are pulling bakar, you're pulling cows. That it's hard work. So these people who were doing the hard work, they would start singing a song, and then that would be mutter. So like a classic, classic work song. We had all the blues of the late 1800 American blues music. Up down, turn around, pick a bale of cotton. Up down, turn around, pick a bale of hay. So when you're doing work that's very difficult and hard, so you use that songs in order to be mizares. The gardai ossur. So the gardai are weavers. But the weavers, weavers is not such a like women would be the weaving. It's not such a heavy work that it's difficult for the body. So that's ossur, because the singing doesn't help the work. Now here clearly the gardai would be the weavers. They're just singing while they're weaving. So this is all going to be bepet. So here is a heter for the heavy work, only because it helps you work, but for weaving just stam, so therefore it's ossur. So again, this is clearly bepet. So Rav Huna now goes even further, and he bottles Zimra. He cancelled music. I mean, this is like, Christmas is cancelled this year. Comes Rav Huna and just cancels music. So Kam 100 geese for a zuz, and 100 say of Gittin for a zuz, but nobody wanted them because they had so much. So by canceling the music, there was such bounty in the world. Biden inflation got knocked down, Trump inflation got knocked down, and just the markets returned to normal. So if you want to help the inflation, just cancel music. Ata Rav Chista was his Talmud Zilzul Bey. He didn't like this Isra on music. If you wanted to buy one, above it was 100 for one. Now, if you wanted to buy a geese for one, for lo mishtachas, and they couldn't even find it because things became scarce. Because Rav Chista destroyed the world by zilzuling on the Isser on the music. So it seems to be a lot going on here, and this doesn't really make any sense. And this Mishnah and the Pasuk is clearly going on the base Mishtos, but yes, we have a pet and the Kli going on in Gittin. So what is going on? So here's the Rambam. The Kain goes to Shalol Lin again, but Kli, and the Kli is ossur. I have a kol mini zemer, and then to listen to a kol shel shir is ossur. To be happy with him, he puts this for lismoch behem. The ossur lishman mipnei churban. Now, this is a bit of an issue. Is why is the Rambam referring to the churban? What's the churban got to do with anything? We saw that's because of the cancelling of the Sanhedrin. The battle of the Sanhedrin was like 40 years before the churban. So, and we saw the Pasuk coming to prove that the music stopped already when the Sanhedrin stopped in the gates. So therefore, why is the Rambam coming here and bringing in churban? So the Shulchan Aruch, the Kain goes through these are all the gezeras for his Tisha B'Av and the churban. Shalolin lin again m'klishir v'kol mini zemer. So you can't play any musical instruments, and anyone who makes a kol shashir to be happy is all ossur. The Ramah, and this is Davka Misharagel Bahem. So again, this is going on like the Tosfos. Tosfos just said that you wake up to it and you sleep by it. Now the Ramah is giving this like a geder of Ragel Bahem. If you Ragel Bahem, so therefore it's ossur. Come on, Malachim that get up and they go to bed with the shear, and the separate thing in the Beit Hamishta. The ossur lishmoim mepia churban, and then here the Shulchan Aruch again. All these isurim are based on the churban. So how are we going from the Sanhedrin to the churban? So this is the Chaste David. It was the late 1700s, early 1800s. So now here, is going through the mashma mehaka the lo ossur ela bebeis hamishta hayayin kedutan v'kadev b'sher lo yishta yayin. So from the bottle of the Sanhedrin, that it's the shir lo yishta yayin is the Isser. So then he goes on to say, well, like, why is Rav going crazy here? That if you hear Zemra Ta'aker, that's like we've ramped it up quickly. Yeah, from in the base of Mishteh, don't drink too. You should be Ta'aker. Kol Zimra, Fila Bepeh, Fila Beloy Yayin. Like, where's he getting this from? The Dargadi is ossur, Mashma Lagamri. So when the weavers are singing completely, it's ossur. So even Avabapuma Shari Kamashmala Mashma Haka Nami Efilu Below Yayin. It's all ossur. This is in the Reish Perak of Gittin. This is our Gemara here, that everything is ossur. That was the Puma Kamashmala. That's how we started off here, that our Gemara seemed to be saying everything was ossur, which is not like Soita at all. The law Tismach Yisrael al Gil Ba'amim, law Nizkar Yayin. Because the pasuk that we brought is that Tismach Yisrael al Gil Ba'amim, Yayin is not written in there. And therefore, even without Yayin. So Rashi there really doesn't make any sense, because how do we know that it's also in a house of Mishteh, and then we bring a pasuk that's nothing to do with the house of Mishteh. So what's Rashi talking about? Now to explain everything. So in order to explain this, first he does an akdime in the sixth parak of Shabbos. So the Gemara says that Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava in Lekaman lo gazru rabban and ele b'midi de isbei tanok v'simcha. So it has to be two things in order to have a gzeres rabban. It has to be isr tanok ve'isr simcha. But one of them, simcha b'lo tanok or tanok b'lo simcha, they didn't make a gezerah. Go see over there. Now it appears to me that what he says bittul hashir mibase hamishte lav davka. But it's anything that's similar to it where there is simcha. But shir b'makam she'ein sham simcha, ele al gav tanog, ika mekomakam hoyu v'leka nami simcha b'harishari medina. So he's saying that really the music is tanog. So something needs to have, based on this Gemara in Shabbos, the tanog needs a simcha with it in order that we can, in order for it to be a gezer, for it to be ossur. And that's where it's written, B'shir lo yishta yayin, is specifically yayin she'esh bo simcha. So when you have a simcha with the tanog, so therefore that's why it's ossur. So therefore now in Gittin, when we ask the marukva zimra manlan de isur, that's zimra de isbei simcha. Davka the zimra de isbei simcha, because the zimra without the simcha was never had a gezerah on it. That's why he gave the pasuk the al tismach Yisrael al gil ba'amim. So therefore, they asked, well, he should have given the shir lo yishtalayim, the lav mikra, the ilu mikra, the lo tismach Yisrael al gil ba'amim, ike lishmoa de afilu simcha below tano, because the bashir lo yishtayayin is where you have even simcha without tanog is ossur, and that's not. So the al tismach al gil ba'amim, you can understand from there that a simcha is ossur when it doesn't have the tanog, but that's not true. So therefore, we sent the pasuk davka that's talking about where the with the feasts, because the simcha of the feasts is where you should be ossuring, and not the where there's just simcha without the feast. So therefore, I don't like your first pasuk, because it seems that the simcha alone is ossur. Mishani Shapir, we have a good answer, because if it's there, I would have thought that would only be with a kli, with a puma. Afogav the ika tarti. See, with the puma, there's two, there's tanuk and there's simcha. I will say it's motzer kamash malan. And then havisari demine leke lemilef ele b'mana. So from it, those who ask from it, we wouldn't have known from the shir lo yishtam yayin. I can't just bring from there, because I would have thought that it would be only with a kli shir. And zimra kloimer afilu b'puma manalan, because that was the whole question in the first place. So from the second pasuk I can only learn mana, and from the first pasuk I only learn it looks like it's only simcha. So therefore this is simcha with the tanog that is also from the first pasuk, even b'peh. Simcha, anything that doesn't have simcha, even though there is a tanog, lo havi b'klal hagazera. It wasn't in the gezerah at all. The Mishabalta Sanhedrin. So when the Sanhedrin was mebatel, so therefore, since you need to have the tanog the music is the tanug, but where there's no simcha added to the tanug of the music, that was never in the gezerah of the Sanhedrin. So now we have a whole flip of where we have that the first was the Sanhedrin 40 years before the Churban, and therefore the whole like Gemara in Gittin is really going before the Churban, and then we have the Gezerah before the Churban, because that was based on the Sanhedrin, and then the Saita, which is talking about the Sanhedrin. All of a sudden, everyone's super machmir, is because after the Churban, now everyone's being machmir on the Iker Din, and the Iker Din is you have to have Tanuk and Simcha, which is where we're going to ossur. And the music is the Tanuk, and the base Mishta is the Simcha, and therefore only when you have the two together, that's where I'm going to ossur. And now after the Churban, which is Tosefet to the which is Tosefet to the bottle of the Sanhedrin, now I'm Chumrah and I'm like ossur and all sorts of stuff. So the Iker heter is that any you can have music anytime you want, as long as you don't have it in that time of Simcha. And again, as a side point, Tosfos says that by mitzvah is a different thing. We will look at that a bit, and then everything else we're having chumras on top of that. But you see in the Amoraim that when they were machmir and he bottled zemer, so therefore there was plenty in the world. And when you zilzul and you bring the zemer, so there's not plenty in the world. And this is the Murume Sadeh. And he kind of, because this is a big chiddush, it's hard to find where the basically again the Saita is talking about the Sanhedrin, and then the Shulchan Aruch is that there's a second that we're more machmir than what's going on in Saita because of the Churban, that the Sanhedrin was mevatel, then the Churban came, and then things were worse after that. So here in the again this is the Netziv, I know kind of a Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, ossur mepnei Churban, the ila bebate mishtos ossur mi shabatel Sanhedrin. So that the Mishnah in Saita is talking about the Sanhedrin, and that it's only ossur in the Bati Mishtos, which is what Rashi was saying. Aval mishas hachorban ossur b'kol makom. But if one says the chorban, then it's ossur b'kol makom. That again we have this Tosefet chumra on the music once the chorban Beis Hamikdash, which is after the Sanhedrin. So we got two levels of isurim here. It says here davkama Kli, but it's mutter, and again that's kind of how you learn the halachas. It's all maklokas. So here's the riff in brachos. So perush gon. This is Rav Sadia gon. That we say that zimmer b'pum is ossur. Hani milik gon negino shel ahavas adam lechavero b'shavach yoife beyoifav. So when you're singing a song. When you're saying how much you love people, whether it's romantic songs and those type of things, that's what's ossur to sing. Could go on like the Yishmalim would do. But different shirs of this because v'zichron chasei shel l'kodesh baruch hu ein adam yisrael nimna mizos. So it seems to be a middle ground here. He says that it's that where it's ossur is where it's which is loving or romantic or erotic music, or where you're nivel peh with your music. So all this rap music, that type of stuff, whatever they're singing about, that type of stuff would be ossur. But stam would be okay. And then he says that shirs with the chastei Hashem would be mutter. So then stam would be ossur. But there's the idea again of why is music ossur as a certain level of it brings to nivel peh, and it brings to levels of joy. As here in the Prisha, he brings Rabbeinu Yonah. Pirish the shelo b'yemei hagolos nami kamar shehas simcha yetera margila es adam yishkoach es mitzvahs. So when you have too much simcha, then you just don't you won't do mitzvahs. So since you won't do mitzvahs, we have to cancel music. And again, the way of canceling music will be, you're at some party at 3:00 in the morning, and you're not going to daven because of it or whatever. I mean, this isn't necessarily so Just if you put a tape on your way to home from work, you're not going to do any mitzvahs anymore. When's it going to be mutter? Bisman sheyaseh imanu nisim v'yashinu, and he will save us. Va'az bayoto zman nismak kedei legos neflenu. From Bogoyim higdal Hashem la'asos imela. So basically, that you have the simcha is not mutter until Yemot Mashiach. So here in the Prisha, so then music is ossur until Yemot Mashiach. So here's the Bach. The Bach is a famous source for Isser. So afilu, even on Shabbos, so again, yesh has here, you should warn the Mekalim, those people who are Mekel, Elishtos Bekli Zemer, when they're to stop them using the Kli Zemer. And even on Shabbos and Yom Tovim, they only matter el chuppah mishum simchas chatan v'kala. So there's a machlokes here in the Achronim, at least, of where when Tosfos says simchas chatan v'kala, is that davka chatan v'kala or things that are like the chatan v'kala, any mitzvah? So here the Bach is clear that it's only the chuppah and simchas chatan v'kala is where you're matter the music, but without it is not. Now it's unclear. What does he mean? Ve'filu b'Shabbos v'yom tovim. Does he mean the Shabbos and Yom is also ossur to sing, or it's to stop using your Kli Zemer, even on Shabbos and Yom Tov, to not use your Kli Zemer? I mean, what does that mean? You're not using your Kli Zemer in Shabbos and Yom Tov, or just Shabbos and Yom Tov. It's ossur to sing. Now, again, most people matir singing for a mitzvah. So people say, well, I can sing Zemiros on Shabbos or things like that. So then they'll, point to that heter. But there are machmirim who hold that it is ossur. As this is the kaf Chaim. Kagom bebeis chatan v'shmamina de besudas bris mila ossur. So again, the kaf Chaim is learning that it's chatan v'kala davka, and it's not just that mitzvahs are mutter, but the sudas brits are ossur, as it says in the Yavitz. That tam nira, as it says the Rav Masher, he says there. Umihu, it's a minhag oilam lahakel b'chol davar mitzvah could go mila pedina ben bakiyotze. Even though he's saying it's ossur, he's saying that it's make a generous ossur, but the oilam is noihag. Now in 31, just before he brings up a different point here. So katav in the Maharil, Gittin, those that sing, b'mincha is like a feast, odacha ki anisani, that you're using the posuk v'ki hagavna, that you shouldn't use psukim and sing with psukim. Kama piyotim l'simcha saraya, so you sing these piyotim for the happiness of the people that are there, because then the Torah is chogeres sak, it wears sak and says, my sons have made me into a min zemer, like into a musical instrument. Even in the Beis Knesses, le regal mitzvah le zemer ad kan l'shoina. So is he saying that there's an isser to sing using psukim, that when you use a posuk in order to make music, so there's a getter of a it says so this is the psak of the Kavachayim. You should only have the songs that they made on the Suda could go on Shabbos. Now, if the songs that you sing on Shabbos, the Zemir Shabbos, are not based on psukim. They're like songs that people have made specifically because there's an isser to sing the psukim. So this is tshuva of Moshe Feinstein. So he talks about the recorder. It's ossur lechatchila to make these songs out of the pesukim in order to lishma the nigun, to hear the tune, lisaneg, to get enjoyment mitzad isser to Isaac, because the isser is you made the pasuk into a kli zemer. The Torah is wearing sacks. This is the same thing. Lifnei Chodesh Ruben says, my children have made me into into violin. Now, there's a gather here that Rav Pam brought, that if you're using the pasuk in order to bring out the tune, so you're not doing it for the pasuk, you're doing it for the tune, so then it's also. But if you're using the tune in order to bring out the pasuk, let's say children are learning the pasuk because of the tune, so therefore it's mutter because you're learning the pasuk through the tune. So the ikr is the pasuk and the tefil is the tune. But when the ikr is the tune and the tefil is the pasuk, so therefore it's ossur. And they have a lot of these Jewish music or whatever it is that they use psukim in order just to make their songs, and they'll steal goyish beats and tunes and stick it on their psukim. Now again, a lot of them will also do the Zemiros of Shabbos, again, which are not psukim, which is like a way of heter. Now, one of the Talmidim of Rapam said to him they were at a wedding and they were singing Shir Amalos. So he said, "What's the heter to sing Shir Amalos?" So he said that they're using the tune to concentrate on the psukim, and as they're singing Shir Amalos, they're thinking about the churban. So if that's why you're singing Shir Malos, so good. But if you're just singing a tune, and the words of Shir Malos are filling the grooves, so then that's the Isser here. As you say, there's a famous tshuva of the Geras Moshe, where he basically says music is ossur. So hayotze mizeh, that out of the mouth ein ossur, when it's not a base mishta. This is basically just a summarization of the halacha in the Ramah. V'lemisha ein ragil, someone who doesn't do it. So again, we saw that in Tosfos, if you're ragil bakach, it's ossur. To come out, all the Rishonim are matir. The lo kasha. Now here he's answering up the kasha we had from the weavers, because the weavers seemingly are just singing b'peh, because since they're always singing when they're working, to have fun, then it's karagel bakach, and therefore the weavers are ragel bakach, and that's why it was also for the weavers to do it in the b'shashchiva v'kima she'asur. But vadai meharai, so that's all much. So with the ikaret din, that's much. But vadai, aval vadai, it's roy to the bal nefesh. Heard this before, bal nefesh laachmir. Someone told me he went to the Poisek in Or Samech, and the Pesach was a Baal Nefesh Yachmir, and he says, well, good, because I'm not a Baal Nefesh. And he said, no, you still have to do it. And I mentioned to another rabbi, and he said, what are you talking about? Baal Nefesh do Baal Nefesh stuff. Non-Baal Nefesh don't do Baal Nefesh stuff. Anyway, Baal Nefesh Yachmir, like the Rambam in Teshuvos. So in the Teshuvos, he's more Machmir than in his halacha. And the Bach, we saw he was Machmir. Psak, Kavase, even though his raya isn't a good raya, it's roy to be machmir. Says Moshe finds the pesach for music. Ube zimmer demana also b'kol makom. So all this was just bepeh, but with you're in a clay, it's always ossur. If it's a davar mitzvah, it's mashma from Tosfos and Ramaz Monter. Even if it's afshe enu l'shemachatan v'kala. So again, this is the machlokas achronim. But he's saying you can be hishpatet the heter of Chatan v'kala. The hanakta kagon base Chatan v'kala. They use the lashon of kagon, and therefore they're setting up the basis. Now, there's a story of during the Omer where somebody was asking Moshe Feinstein about whether you can listen to tapes during the Omer, and he basically said along the lines of it's the same as the rest of the year. So the guy took it that so the guy started saying that Moshe Feinstein says it's mutter to listen to tapes during the Omer. And so I said, no, it's also the rest of the year, because it's like the rest of the year. It's like it's always also to listen to tapes. Then it's also on the Omer as well to listen to tapes. So this is Moshe Feinstein's machmir on music. Everyone should be machmir, and he holds it's not. It's also to listen to music, also to sing psukim. So the Meiri is really be a makel. Eile derek kalas rosh v'tanog. So if it's a derek of kalas rosh, so that's why it's aser. Shelo ne'emar eile derek pritzos. So again, this is the iser of the music is derek pritzos. V'sharam ka'amim. That's what the pasuk says. Minhag ha'amim. That's how the nations do it. So the seemingly in the time the nations were constantly like the whole thing was about nivel peh. When a woman was a bride was walking down the aisle or for there when they would sing these lewd songs to her, and that was at the time of Chazal. So a lot of the music at that time, the time of the Romans, and the time it was very lewd, and the Romans were hedonistic. That was like their whole thing. So their music was mixed in with their hedonism as well as a lot of the more recent music is as well. Here is Teshuvos VaHanhagos and Moshe Sturmbach. So we have a gewaltige heter here. So avoid Arabim Yisvavu Berochovos Ba'efes. It was this in Meiser She'elo Havichas V'Galei Devarim Chamurim. So everybody is playing music and they're not listening to anything, even though there's she'ein mitavlim al Yerushalayim kamitzvasa. So even though people are listening to music and they're not doing avelis on Yerushalayim and the Churban as they're supposed to, mikom makom yorvichu shelo yavo mizel le'odaverus, that we get we have the revach, we have the profit, we gain that they are not going to come to do other averas. So therefore, by listening to music, you're not going to come to other averas. And listening to music, you'll come to not do other averas. I had I was going to a meal on Purim when I was in yeshiva, and I met this guy. I was asking him if he knows where the street is. He says, "Yeah, I'm walking that way," and I'm walking with him. I started asking him in kashas on Megillah, the Masechet Megillah, and he doesn't know what the hell's flying. And he says to me after a while, he gives me an answer, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, and explain to him why. And after a while, he says, "You know what? You're going this way. I'm going that way. You're from Dublin. That's amazing. You could have been doing drugs, and you're learning Gemara." And he walks off. And l'chayr is kailed here in the Teshuvos VaHanhagos that we are being marviach, that you're not coming to do other averas when you're listening to music. So no matter what you're doing and whatever everything's ossur, it's okay because you could have been doing worse averas. So the Shevet Halevi, he's quite machmir in this inyan. Only shir b'peh comes out of the klal of Isser if it's not on yayin. The Rambam, so we said other than the Reisha, kol min is ever kol mishmiya kol, but the Rambam closed for us the gate, and he ossured all levels of mishmiya kol shir sheba olam, even isn't kli shir miyuchad lekach. So this is a teshuva on like record players and this type of thing. So therefore, it's anything is everything's ossur, even if it's a record player. Here on another teshuva, Shevi Levi, he brings the sefer Shurim Mutzunim, that it brings a heter for listening to the radio. So Ketav radio, you hear the news and business stuff, and between the business and the news, you also hear the music on the Kli Shir. The EF Shar Litzamsem. And so basically the heter here, since it's impossible to be mitzamsem, that like roiv is the yesh loimer that we go after roiv tashmishu. So the roiv of the tashmishu is for the business and the news, and therefore you can't be mitzamsem, you can't be perfect, you can't get 100%. So therefore, if a few bits of music jumps in here and there, the ikker's the roiv. And that's for business. I'm not sure exactly why you need to listen to music for business. Listen to the radio for business, like whatever they tell you, it doesn't really matter. But again, you have, a heter of, you see, Azlin and Basar Roiv Tashmishu. So that's, now he'll reject this, but this is a heter that he brings down, that EF Charlotte Samsem, and we go Basar Roiv Tashmishu. So if you're using the internet and some dirty pictures get in there, well, EF Charlotte Samsem, and as long as your roiv tashmish is okay, seemingly the heter would hold there. V'lamaisa, see, in our busha and our tsar, it's forgotten this halacha. This is a halacha pasuka, and it's just like forgotten in the world. Everyone's forgotten about this halacha. And we ein lanu limud zuchud gomer. We can't really do a limud zuchud completely. Umikol shekain Be'ez Suda, Chatun is mutter. So this is as one kli you can have it at a so if it's a mitzvah l'ora halevava, so that if you're doing something, if you're doing it in a holy way to bring people to kedusha, and for sure at a wedding, and in a place where there's no isser, or somebody who is shomei le pekach etzvenu, so that if somebody's depressed, then listening to music is a mitzvah. So there's another heter that if you're depressed, then you can listen to the music. So here in the Chelkas Ya'akov fled the Nazis. Is a mutter to put the radio the radio from Erev Shabbos for a sick person. The music is for refuah, and then he would be materit. Now miyaten v'asher yishtaker Jor has here to be careful, Maviti, to not hear the music on the radio. However, because of our Avino Eilam Einam, no one's and these are klal with this, and only Chasidim and Anshe Maisa seem to care about it. And I've seen Bnei Alev Muatim, which is a reference. We've seen it in the Tanya. He's bringing in here for the people who are actually holding by halacha. And we need to draw ourselves to be matir and to be limud skos. So again, when we see in the teshuvas is to have the heterim for listening to music. It's all based on the limud skos. It's not meikar din, although we have seen some. The zimras radio pul panim. You can be soymech on the shitas Rashi or Tosfos in Gittin. It's only in the Beis Hamishta alayayin is ossur, or if you rogel bakach. But if you listen to music all the time, you will be rogel bakach and the lashon of the Ramah. So that the music for Avodah Zarah, in Zimras and Avodah Zarah. So it's like yayin, where yayin for Avodah Zarah is ossur, but the yayin today is not made for Avodah Zarah, so it's for a different purpose. So here, if the whole isser is only on Avodah Zarah, then the music today isn't Avodah Zarah, so it'll be motters. It's also Savara Gedoyle Lahatir. Kaven at the time of the Gezerah to ossur the music from the time of Avelus. They didn't have the radio. Lo chala gezerah on the radio. This is what it says there, because in their days they didn't have a ganai lo osru chachamim. So that ganai. So there was he's bringing an example of where you have today there's a ganai that they didn't have today, so they didn't osur it. So therefore today it's mutter, which you can I think is to do to somebody. So since that ganai wasn't there, it's not included in the gezerah. So since they didn't have radio, it's not included in the gezerah. Should be yemenu ike ganai. Become lo nigzer v'nechadesh gezerah chadasha v'nishar behetero. So we don't have a new gezerah, and therefore it's left as a setter. So he's saying that we have a musical instrument. So therefore, ein zeh doime lemin kli zemer. It's not a musical instrument. The radio is not a musical instrument. So all musical instruments are included in the gezerah. Because that it's sheyit chadesh afal pi shelo hayu b'shas gezerah. So even though it's not in the time of the gezerah, devadai asher mishamad gezerah hayita kol mini kli zemer. So he's saying the gezerah is on all types of musical instruments. And since the radio is not a musical instrument, therefore the gezerah didn't fall on that. But as far as notenas, even kol zeh sheyichrates b'chlal about the radio. So any new musical instrument that will be invented from the time of the gezerah to now will be included in the gezerah, because they made a gezerah musical instruments, but the radio is not roim klal minagen. So you can't play a radio. So since the radio is not a musical instrument, uba mi marachark. I'm not sure exactly here what he's saying. If it's like a the way a scientific idea of how the radio is working, that it comes from far away. It's not coming like a guy's playing the instrument far away, and then it goes into the radio waves, and then it goes into your radio, or what exactly is going on. But it's not the musical instrument that's in your room right now playing. It's a radio that's playing it. Al pi chadshus teva mikri panim chadashus. So since this like new technology, it's called panim chadashus. Ve'enu b'klal gezerah va'af. Even though it's erroneous avara ba'alma, and anybody who wants is able to push it away. At least it's a mokum to have a heter. here, anyone who wants, he can push away. So he's brought this svara. It says that basically everyone argues on this and says, no, how can you say that? Moshe Feinstein says the rady's the same, and all the other poskim say it's the same. But here's a sniff heter. So we've had, because it's easy to be machmir on everything. The sniff heters we saw that it's only if it's the tanug and the simcha together. So that's where it's ossur, and therefore everything else is just a chumrah for the avelis, and then it'll be depending on your avelis if you're doing it or not. That's the ikar isser is based on avelis for, but it's not an ikar halacha. Then we had the heter of that it's only music, only nivel peh is ossur, or only music of Avodah is ossur, or any music you have on the radio would be mutter. Obviously, with any speakers, that type of stuff would be mutter. It could even be if you're listening to music and then it's going through the speaker, even though they're playing the musical instrument. If you go to a stadium concert, you can't even hear the musical instruments; it's all coming through the speaker. Maybe you could argue there that it's heter. You have all the you have the heter of mitzvahs, and you have the heter of efshar litzamtzem. You can't be perfect all the time, and then you have the heter of, well, you could have been doing drugs and instead you're listening to music.